Well, hello, my name's Guru, and I want to talk about Biomutant. This is a game I've been anticipating for a while. I've been very excited to play this game. I remember seeing the first trailers for it and then reading a little bit about it and seeing what the game was striving to be, and it seemed like something that I would have fun with. And then as time went on and I saw gameplay trailers or the gameplay footage, I became more and more excited to play it. And now I have, and I'll say this, the game is not perfect, but there's a lot more good in it than bad. And I enjoyed my experience for the time that I played it. I played through the main story, I played a good amount of side content, and I came out of it enjoying my experience overall. I want to start off by talking about the story of the game. What are you working towards? Your goal is to fight the World Eaters and unite the warring tribes. And the reason you have to do this is because these two factors determine whether the Tree of Life lives or dies, and the tree just sustains the world. The World Eaters are something you have to fight no matter what, but the tribes are something you have a decision about. You can choose what tribe to be a part of, and though there are numerous tribes, really you can just split them off into good or bad. They have bits of personality sprinkled into them, but for the most part, one half of them wants to save the tree, the other half wants to destroy the tree. And depending on which one you choose, after you defeat the World Eaters, the tree either dies or lives. And that's basically the gist of everything. The story's not bad, but it's nothing exceptional in my opinion. It's not something I came out of saying, man, that was a great story. I really enjoyed that. No, the story was just there. The big thing is the gameplay and particularly the combat, because that's something you're going to be doing a lot of, and it's really, at least for me, was the thing that kind of drew me in, was the combat itself. And of course the world, because visually this game, I think it looks very nice. It's fun to go through this world and see all the weirdness about it, you know, when it comes to the design of the characters, the enemies, the bosses, and just going through it is fun. It's an enjoyable world to explore. But now I'm going to focus my sights on the combat. The combat is fast, it's fluid, it's energetic, it's something that is fun. It's not perfect by any means. It can kind of get a little bit tedious, a little bit boring as the game goes on, but I didn't really experience that till I was close to the end anyway. But early on, when I was first experiencing it and trying out different weapons, different abilities, I was enjoying myself a lot. There are classes in this game, but your class doesn't matter that much. You can pick any class and then tailor your playstyle later on by just putting points and things you want. The class does determine your starting abilities. It determines what certain perks you will be locked out of, because they do have exclusive things that come with certain classes. But if you don't have a particular build you're going for and you just want to play something, just pick whatever stands out to you. In terms of weapons, you have a good variety of weapons to pick from in terms of what class of weapon they are, because when it comes to the actual weapons themselves, you can find weapons all throughout the world. You can make your own weapons. There's just a whole lot of them, especially when you're doing the tribe missions, because they each offer their own weapon for defeating or being a part of a certain tribe. But there's a good amount of weapon variety, and they all have their own skill trees that go alongside them, so you can get different abilities. While this isn't the most robust of weapon skill trees, because you only have like a few things you can really put points into with the weapons before you have everything, and you could pretty much, as long as you're willing to put the points in, you can learn to use every weapon to the best of its ability. But the variety of weapons, from one-handed weapons, dual-wielding weapons, weapons that crush things, that's just what they call it, crush weapons, two-handed swords, or I call them two-handed blades, but they can have a number of different attachments depending on what you customize the weapon to be or what you find. But they all offer their own unique style of play. They all have their own fun things. Some of them, when I've seen some of the heavier weapons, I found more of those that have different elemental effects to them than I did when it came to my one-handed weapons or my dual wielding. Maybe that's just my luck in finding things, or maybe that's just how the game distributes things. The bigger, harder hitting weapons have more elemental effects. It was later on in the game when I finally came across some good parts to craft some elemental weapons from. But then we get to guns. You have pistols, you have shotguns, you have assault rifles, you have regular rifles. Those are your basic things you have. And with pistols, you can dual wield those, and that has its own skill tree as well for either using one weapon or using two. they all have their own stuff that goes alongside, and they kind of function the same way melee weapons do, where there's only a few things you really have to unlock with each one of them. And you also have your abilities, which are biogenetic abilities and side powers. Biogenetic abilities, you can unlock these by getting these green crystals, which are biohazardous materials that you can use to buy these powers. There's nothing you really have to do. You can just find these materials. You don't have to level up. You just have to find these and then use them to unlock these different abilities. I didn't really find myself using them a lot. I mostly just tried them out for fun because they don't really do a lot to really help you in combat, besides from just looking interesting sometimes. But with the green material you get, you also have to use that for upgrading your resistances to certain elements out in the world, because there are these areas that when you step into them, they have these different effects, and if you don't have a high enough resistance, it's just gonna keep building up until it starts to drain away at your health. But I will say one thing about these areas before I get back to actually talking about the abilities themselves. I didn't find myself really having to worry too much about them, either because I found armor that protected me, or they weren't really places I had to really go into to do anything. I mostly just explored them just to explore. So if you just want to focus on those biogenetic powers, you can feel free to do that. You'll probably find some armor that will help you get through them perfectly fine. But I'll go on to the side powers. The side powers are something you do have to work towards a little bit more, just because the points you have to get for them. One, they deal with the morality system of the game, which is light and dark, but don't let that trick you into thinking you have to really go one way or another to be able to unlock them. You can get a balance between them. There's plenty of opportunities in the story, in the world, to unlock an even number of points for each. So nothing really is going to be locked off to you if that's how you decide to play it. You can put everything into one if you just want to super quickly just unlock all the powers of light or dark, but you can get both. By the end of the game, I was perfectly balanced, and I could have any power I wanted as long as I had enough side points, which you also get through making these decisions and doing these things out in the world. Primarily come from the story and those decisions you make and choices of how you interact with people and do things like that, but also you can find shrines all throughout the world that you just go to, pray at, and then they give you some points. But just like the biogenetic abilities, unless you're going for a pure mage character, there's not really something you're going to be using a lot other than just to use them for fun or maybe just to help you out. But as the game progressed, I didn't really see myself using them a lot. One, because they became less useful. I imagine this would be one of those times where you really would have to choose your class wisely and go to Side Freak, which is the mage class in this game, if you really want to get the best experience with using these abilities, because they use up a lot of energy to keep using them over and over again. That energy is also something you use to dodge, and you might want to dodge a lot. You probably are going to be dodging a lot, so you're not really going to waste that on those powers all the time. There are other things that involve combat, such as like these different vehicles you may get that do have some combat ability that you unlock within the story when you're fighting the different world eaters, because you need a different vehicle to basically fight them in their different habitats. But I didn't find myself using these a lot either, especially because there's only one that I really see myself using for a large portion of the game, which was this mech. But my melee weapons did more damage to my enemies by the time I actually unlocked it. So I didn't really see myself having to use that at all, outside of the fight it was necessary for. When it comes to the actual enemies you fight, they differ a lot aesthetically, but when it actually comes to what they do and how they fight, you can put them in different categories. You have these smaller enemies, they may come at you with melee or ranged. Then you have these more brutish enemies that primarily will come at you with melee, charge you, throw objects at you, things like that. And then bestial enemies that might spit acid, spit fire, or just claw you to death. And these bestial enemies also include the big bosses of the game, the world eaters, which are all these big bestial monsters that are the largest creatures you're really going to fight in the game. These enemies can be fun to fight, but once you really kind of get used to it, it's pretty easy to defeat them. Because going through the game, I would say from a challenge perspective, they weren't really that hard. I didn't find myself dying to enemies that much, really. I did face a challenge when it came to one of the world eaters. That's just because the game didn't really explain what I was supposed to do, or I didn't pay good enough attention to know exactly what what I needed to do. And it was kind of just annoying. It felt like a weird change of pace because it, like I said, you have these vehicles that you use for these boss fights. But at least for this first one, I went towards fighting. It wasn't very enjoyable due to the vehicle section for that one. I did not enjoy the kind of weird change of pace it had. But after that one, I didn't really mind them too much. And they were all relatively easy. So when it actually comes to fighting enemies, at least when I played on normal difficulty, I didn't worry about dying. If I missed a dodge or I didn't block properly, it wasn't really the biggest deal. I kind of just found myself jumping in, not caring if I got hit, just smashing things up. Sometimes I would block, sometimes I would dodge, of course, if I felt like doing some combos, doing certain things. But once you really get used to the enemies, you know what all of them are going to do pretty much. And you can easily just beat them, especially because you have a lot of consumables that help your health. Just a whole bunch. You'll find so many throughout the world just from exploring. You don't even have to explore super deeply. If you just stop someplace when you're going by, you'll find. Or you can just buy a bunch, because you can find plenty of things to sell. You can make a lot of money very easily. So you don't really have to worry about being out of those things. I thought I was out once, but then I just figured out it wasn't. I was used to things just automatically going to my health wheel where I can select all these different things that when it stopped doing that, I was like, oh man, do I just not have health? But no, it had just replaced it all with like a consumable item that adds a certain element to your guns. So I just went and added all my health stuff in there, and then I was back to not worrying about dying at all, because I never run out of health. But despite that, I still had fun fighting enemies. I still enjoyed my experience going up against them, and I enjoyed it more just because it was just fun, just wrecking them, just destroying them. Especially when you really get your build together and you get all the perks and you get all the right weapons you want, you can just deal absurd amount of damage, just easily destroy them. Like, fights were going very, very quick the longer the game progressed. And it did get to a point where I was just like, I don't really feel like fighting these guys, so I just run by them. Because it's like, yeah, I get some XP, but I got places to be out, especially when I was like working towards finishing the game. I just run by them. It's not really worth it. If I had to give the combat an actual score, I give it like a 7 or 8. It's fun, it gets a little tiring at the end, especially when you feel like you've played enough the game and you're ready to finish everything up. You've done all the side quests you want to do. It was just super easy. Maybe some other people have different experiences because you could build your character how you want. Maybe if you went with like a side freak and you were just casting magic, maybe it'd be a little more difficult for you, or you play on a higher difficulty, because I played on normal. I'm going to try it out on hard, New Game Plus, to see what it's like. Maybe I'll get a little more challenge and maybe the combat will be better for me. But with how the enemies actually fight, I feel like they'll probably just be harder to kill and they'll hit harder, which does add a certain level of extra difficulty, but really isn't what I usually go for with the difficulty. Sometimes it can be fine, but it won't really add that much if that's what it is. So overall, when it comes to my opinion of this game, because there's not really much more to really add. The game isn't like complex in any way in terms of what it has to offer. It's a game with combat being the thing that really is supposed to draw you in. That and the world, because beautiful game. But overall, good experience, enjoyable. I would recommend it if you're looking for something fun to play for like 20 hours. Then yeah, I recommend you go and get it. But that's basically all I gotta say. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, like and subscribe. Go check out some of my other stuff. And thanks for watching.